Hello everyone, welcome to the 2023 World Journal Asian American Forum. My name is Wang Ruoran. Today we're going to discuss issues like how does anti-Asian hate change after the pandemic? What are the forms of hate against the Asian and helpful resources for those who may encounter hate? We are honored to have elected officials like Congresswoman Judy Chu, State Assemblyman Mike Fong speaking at the forum, as well as leaders from government, nonprofit organizations to share latest data and resources. First, let's talk about data. During the pandemic, the AAPI community has experienced record high hate incidents and crimes. How about after the pandemic? Let's invite Charlie Wu to share the latest data on anti-Asian hate incidents or crimes on state level. Charlie Wu is a founder and chair of CAUSE, which is a nonprofit organization with a mission to advance the political and civic empowerment of the AAPI community.
Latest data in June of 2023, just a few weeks ago, and we find out that people's feeling about whether they have been subject to hate crime or discrimination has dropped a little bit since its peak and almost went back to the pre-pandemic level. Because during the 2001, 2002, during the peak of the hate crime, almost half the Asian Americans felt that they have experienced discrimination incidents. But now it's only about a little bit more than 1/3 experience, so it dropped back a little bit. But we don't know what that in actuality, whether that happened or not, because sometimes when people get used to hate crime, they might not feel that they experience because they get used to it. So if you look at other data, we can see the impact of hate crime, right? For example, 75%, 3/4 of Asian Americans feel that our community has always been subject to discrimination and hate. Okay, that is 3 out of 4. It's a very large number. And about almost 70%, over 2/3 of Asian Americans feel that they're worried about, their family or themselves being a victim of physical violence due to hate. And similar number believe that was afraid that their children would be subject to bullying because of hate at school. So those are very large numbers. And then since the Monterey Park shooting, also almost 2/3 of Asian Americans are beginning to worry about gun violence, being a victim of gun violence. And our confidence in crime prevention and personal safety has dropped from, like 55% pre-pandemic, pre-hate crime to about 40%, which means only 40% of Asian Americans feel safe. And then the government really protect their control crime and protect their personal safety. And all that tells me is that Asian Americans had a lot of worries. Okay, they worry about a lot. Although the report of personal experience dropped a little bit, but they worry a lot. This is all in their mind. Plus the economic pressure that we've been building in California, and a lot of Asian Americans feel that all this have impacted their mental health. Almost 1/3 of Asian Americans feel that their mental health suffered because of all these hate incidents. Despite all these challenges, despite all these worries, Asian Americans continue to be the most optimistic, resilient community in California, because over 2/3 of Asian Americans believe that, gradually we'll be more accepted and things will be much better. This would go away. What we have suffered in the last 3 years, we are most resilient. We want to contribute. We want to work hard. We want to get ahead. And I think that's the kind of valuable American citizens that this country should treasure.
Although the data shows anti-Asian incidents and crimes dropped a lot, the hate never disappeared. During the past year, many Chinese American politicians were questioned on their loyalty, including Congresswoman Judy Chu, who were born and raised in the United States and served in public service for over 30 years. She commented on this and updated the federal legislation that helps combating Asian hate.
I was outraged, I was disgusted, and I was angry because he was operating on a stereotype that Asian Americans have had to deal with in this country for a very, very long time, which is that they are foreigners in their own country, no matter how long they've been here, no matter if they did so much for the country and contributed quite a bit to this country, and no matter if they were someone like me who was born in the country. But the alarming thing is that these are charges that are now being leveled against many Chinese Americans. It's first started with our Chinese American scientists and engineers when there was a scapegoating, a racial profiling done of them as being spies for China. And so many of them were targeted, they were investigated, and even arrested for being spies for China under something that President Trump started called the China Initiative, only targeting the Chinese. And he was using that as an excuse to go after them. As a result, they opened up these cases on many Chinese American scientists and engineers, but many of them fell by the wayside because there was not enough evidence, and in some cases, the evidence was false. Well, the main thing is we have to fight back. We have to step up, say something about it, say this is wrong, and say this is part of a terrible stereotype that is being used against Chinese Americans and Asian Americans, and that, in fact, the opposite is true. We've contributed a lot to this country, and we've made this country better. One of the most difficult situations that Asian Americans faced was the anti-Asian hate related to COVID-19. 3 years of anti-Asian hate and 11,500 cases of anti-Asian hate and hate crimes and hate incidents happened. As a result, from the very beginning in March of 2020, we in CAPAC, which is the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus, which I chaired, started doing all kinds of things, held press conferences, made statements, wrote letters to the White House, and finally we introduced legislation, the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act, which includes my bill, the No Hate Act, which improves the level of hate crime statistic gathering and the education of law enforcement on how to prosecute a hate crime. Finally, let me say that this anti-China hysteria is resulting most recently in something very alarming, which is prohibitions against Chinese people owning land. Now, in Florida, Governor DeSantis actually signed a bill saying that Chinese nationals would not be allowed to buy land, not even just a condo for them to live in. Can you believe that? It is racist, it's discriminatory, and we've not had these kind of terrible laws for 100 years since the racist early 1900s. So Congressmember Al Green and I introduced a bill, and the bill stops these state laws from being enacted because of their discriminatory nature, and it does it on a federal basis. I know this federal bill will be difficult to get through, but we must speak out, and we're speaking out through our bill, that this is not right, this is not proper in an America that's supposed to be standing up for equality for all.
State Assemblyman Mike Fung also talked on Asian politicians being targeted and state legislation that helps fight Asian hate.
They're being questioned on their loyalty, but we know that they're proud, loyal Americans. For politicians to question their loyalty is abhorrent and horrible. I was incredibly disappointed to hear those attacks earlier this year, but I'm not surprised by the attacks. Asian Americans have always been targeted throughout our history, whether it's through the Chinese Exclusion Act, whether it's through the Japanese American internment. Some Americans do not see us as Americans, even though we were born here and raised here in America. And we saw this recently, just about 20 years ago, after 9/11, with attacks toward the Middle Eastern and South Asian communities. We saw this during the pandemic with increased acts of anti-Asian hate, particularly towards Chinese Americans in our community. And as an elected official, it's very important to continue to push forward and to advocate the increasing visibility of Asian Americans in all levels of government and all sectors of community life, so that we're not scapegoated We are as American as everyone else. And we need to continue to push messages that Asian Americans are Americans and that Asian American history is American history. And we need to continue to uplift the Asian Pacific American community here in America in our community. At the state level, I introduced 2 gun safety bills, Assembly Bill 732 and Assembly Bill 733, which will strengthen protections and take guns away from those convicted of a crime and those who should not have weapons in their hands if they've been convicted of a felony or higher. This will decrease the number of guns in our streets and help keep our communities safe. I also introduced Assembly Bill 1638, which will require translated updates for emergencies such as mass shootings or natural disasters. Here in Monterey Park, where the shooting occurred, we know that many of our residents speak Chinese and only Chinese and need updates in language in Chinese. And so with this bill, it would increase the opportunity for cities, municipalities, and government agencies to make sure that they're providing in-language updates to the community. I'm also proud to have secured $4 million in funding to increase awareness about red flag laws in non-English speaking communities. And lastly, I'm also proud to support Assembly Bill 1354, which would make sure that Asian American history and the contributions of Asian Pacific Americans are shared in our kindergarten through 12th grade curriculum. And this bill will instruct the Instructional Quality Commission for the state of California to share the contributions of Asian Pacific Americans, but also to highlight anti-Asian hate and to really talk about the violence in the community as well. So really making sure that we highlight the experiences of Asian Pacific Americans in our curriculum, in our schools.
On January 21st, the Monterey Park mass shooting that killed 11 people shocked the whole nation. This tragedy is a wake-up call to see the issues inside Asian communities. Henry Lo was the mayor of Monterey Park when the shooting happened. He talked on how the city was impacted by the shooting and the recovery process.
Sure. Well, I think that for the city of Monterey Park, as residents, we are still undergoing the process of recovery from the shooting incident of January 21st. It's only been 5 months. And I think people are still trying to make sense of why this happened in our city. Why did the shooter do what he did? After all, he left no suicide note, no manifesto. So we may never know. But as a city, we are doing what we can to make sure that no one is dealing with the trauma alone. We've partnered with community-based organizations like Chinatown Service Center to provide free counseling services. The city created a Monterey Park Community Healing Fund to help the community recover, from the trauma. We've partnered with the Small Business Administration to provide low-cost loans to businesses impacted by the incident, especially those businesses close to where the shooting occurred. So, and we also continue to make sure that we evaluate, we continue to survey to make sure that if we're missing, if there are any gaps to our efforts, that we address them. Well, I think that after shooting, a lot of issues were, this shooting, I think, exposed a lot of issues in our community, issues of domestic violence, economic inequality, dealing with past trauma, and all of that amplified by gun violence. And I think that gun violence is an issue that Asian Americans cannot ignore, because I can tell you right now that my concern is that right now gun manufacturers are targeting Asian Americans because we have the lowest rate of gun ownership. So my concern is that they're going to try and use these incidents, the unfortunate rise of anti-Asian hate, not to mention the incident in our community, to justify their own special interest campaign to get Asian Americans to buy more guns. And so I think that, what the shooting revealed is that our community has the same issues like everyone else. Again, as I mentioned, domestic violence, family issues, and again, we don't want to have gun violence amplify these other issues I mentioned.
Combating hate is a long-time endeavor. The legislature and government have put a lot of effort into it. LA County Human Relations Commissioner Michael Chen shared resources from the LA County and Becky Maron Deputy Director of the Civil Rights Department of California, will share state resources.
Phone number 211, they can report hate crime, and then the police department they can be follow up and taking care of this one. And for the mental health, LA County Department of Mental Health, they provide the number 1-800-854-771.
Through the California vs. Hate resource line and network, we are able statewide to provide support to people who may be targeted for hate. This may be in the form of providing people with an explanation of what their options are if they are targeted for hate. Someone can call us in over 200 languages, or they can report online in 15 languages, and we will make sure that we get back to them to let them know all of their choices. Some people want to go to law enforcement. We can help them understand what that process looks like. Others may not feel comfortable going to law enforcement, and they may want to pursue other options, which could include legal services, mental health services, other kinds of social services. We are able to connect people with those resources and support, and importantly, we are able to follow up through care coordination services, where we make sure that if you reach out to an organization and they aren't able to help, we help you identify another one that may be able to. Finally, we are hoping through this process to improve our understanding of hate and therefore our ability to combat it. We know from our colleagues at the Attorney General's office that we are seeing an increase in acts of hate across our state more broadly. We know we have seen record-breaking increases of hate in recent years against the AA and HPI community. And yet we also know from our colleagues at Stop AAPI Hate that we have an underreporting of acts of hate, in particular in the AA and HPI community, and in fact in many communities across our state. Hate crimes don't happen in a vacuum. They happen when we do not have an effective enforcement of civil rights across the board. So we encourage people who are targeted for acts of hate to reach out to California vs. Hate. If you are targeted for another form of discrimination, come to the California Civil Rights Department. You can find our information online, and we can make sure that we are effectively enforcing all of the civil rights for all Californians in our state. Thank you.
Lastly, let's invite Mayor of the Temple City, William Mann, to talk about how to engage young people into fighting hate and promoting cultural competency.
So we are very lucky, and I'm very proud to report that after the pandemic, the amount of anti-Asian hate incidents have fallen dramatically. In fact, we haven't had one since 2021, early 2021. So part of why we are so proud of that is because as a community, we have really come together to support each other, not just the Asian American community, but the entire Temple City community has really come together to speak out against this and say, this doesn't really belong here. So we have a youth committee here in Temple City that consists of 10 high school students that either attend Temple City High School or they're actually residents of Temple City. And the way we promote our youth is to have them participate directly in city business. So these 10 members are the finest young people in all of Temple City. They actually run their own meetings here. They use city council chambers as part of their meetings. They run it like city council. And what is impressive about them is they identify the issues that are important to them. And some of these issues include things that are related to cultural competency. So I believe that in order for our community to grow out of all of the incidents that we have seen over the last 3 years is through our youth, through the next generation.
The pandemic comes to an end, but Asian hate does not. Hate towards the AAPI community has been existing for a long time, starting from the Chinese Exclusion Act to today's various forms. By joint efforts with other communities, legislation, and government resources, we can end it. Thank you for watching. See you next time.